you look back at every one of those stops, it kind of speaks to, you see the potential of the launch pad that a company might be sitting at, or the opportunity to influence, to put your stamp, right, on kind of where things could head, or just to help them get to that next level.
What is appealing to me is a couple things that have been consistent throughout my journey and where things have succeeded for me. Number one is quality of people. Number two thing that appeals to me is a company that's got a commitment, but early in the journey. So all those things line up for me. I get excited.
Welcome into the Independent Thinking Podcast. This is your host, Rob Stott. It's one thing, I think, to talk about the improvements and investments and everything that's gone into the custom integration space here at Nationwide Marketing Group. And for us to talk about it, I think, we're obviously going to do that and want to pump the noise and have everyone know about, the work that's being done and improvements being made, and just how that group continues to, well, I say group, the groups, the three groups of our custom integration division here at Nationwide are continuing to just advance in this industry. And I think anyone would expect that, right? Us talking about ourselves, we're going to say nice things as we should. But it's when you see, the belief from around the industry, and it takes shape in many forms. And we see in the coverage, and we've had the attendees at our shows come and tell us directly themselves, that how impressed they are with everything that's happening. And then you see the recent moves within the group to bring in additional help. And I don't think, specifically I'm talking about Frank Stearns, as you can tell probably by now a minute into this week's episode. And, we're talking to Frank, but I don't think a Frank Stearns comes to spend his time with Nationwide Marketing Group's custom integration division if he doesn't believe in what's happening here and the moves being made to support this industry. And not just, the average, what you'd expect the custom integration space or other groups to do from a buying group perspective, but the different markets that, our Oasys and Ozione and Ellipsis groups are going after and attempting to support and lift throughout this space. So awesome to have Frank join the team. And I know, there was obviously some buzz when the announcement was made back a few months ago prior to the Oasys event, but to have him there and see him there and watch him sort of ingrain himself with what's going on was really cool, just selfishly to watch that happen and have that access to him. And of course, we couldn't let him leave Austin without sitting down with us for a podcast. So, that's exactly what we did. And it was awesome to be able to dive into his background and sort of set the stage, I think, for what he's going to do as a consultant, for our CI team and their efforts here at Nationwide. So let's just dive into it. This is Frank Stearns, our consultant here now at Nationwide Marketing Group for our custom integration division on the Independent Thinking Podcast. All right, we are back on the Independent Thinking Podcast and excited to take, the show back on the road, coming off of primetime not too long ago. And we're here in Austin, Texas at the Oasys Summit. And Mr. Frank Stearns, appreciate you taking the time and sitting down with us. This is awesome.
Well, hey, Rob, it's my pleasure to be here. I am really excited. The energy at the summit is just fantastic.
Yeah, well, first Oasys Summit, obviously, for you in a new capacity that we'll dive into eventually. But I have to imagine HTSN events in the past that you've been to shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was trying to think about this last night while I'm trying to go to sleep, and I'm all wired from being excited about the show. And how many of these types of events have I been to? And I think it's over 100 now.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
A storied career that's what we'll do first. Let's dive into kind of your background and path. I know if you know the name in the headline of this podcast, obviously who we're talking about, if that sparked your interest. But for those that don't know who Frank Stearns is, give us that kind of career background and path to where you are here today.
Yeah, I've been in the audio business for 42 years. And frankly, it was all I ever wanted to do since I was 12 years old. I was a bass player in the student orchestra. I had a friend who was also a bass player, and his neighbor worked at Infinity Speakers, which was the high-end speaker company. in Los Angeles, where I grew up, and he and I became audiophiles at 12. And after school, we would go to the local hi-fi store and listen to records and speakers, and we just became hi-fi geeks. And that's what I wanted to do with my life. It would and it never really changed.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. I feel like that's a common refrain in this industry, right? So many of professionals in it kind of grew up as fans, and that's what I don't know how many other industries are like that, but it's so cool to be kind of connected and associated with one because the passion shows through, right? I've seen you have conversations. We've had conversations and seen you have conversations with so many people here, and that passion, the way it shows through, and it's not just you, it's everyone else in the room, right? Kind of grown up fans of this industry and the products and gear within it, and we're all kind of, I heard someone call you it earlier, the product geek, right? The tech geek, like we all are. We all are that, right?
I had every issue of Audio Magazine and Stereo Review, and I read all the reviews and all the graphs and curves and watts per channel and all that stuff, and I loved it. Yeah.
So, I mean, and so growing up a fan, you can dive into that career path. What stops have you made along the way, and to where you are today here?
Well, there's been a few stops, but as I said, I started when I was young, audiophile at 12, hung out at the stereo stores. Then my father had a pharmacy in Hollywood, California, and I used to work summers for him in the drugstore, drive deliveries, that sort of thing. And he had a customer who was the Western Regional Advertising Manager for Stereo Review magazine at the time. Cool. Yeah. Her name was Jane, and she'll show up in my story multiple times. One of these things that's interesting and really unusual. But Jane helped me draft a resume. Jane and I would talk about hi-fi, and she said, well, when you're ready, I'll introduce you. I know everybody in the audio industry. That's cool. And so Jane helped me draft a resume. In the meantime, I put myself through business and marketing school by working in a stereo store, working retail at Leo's Stereo, selling jet sounds, car stereos, and I don't know what. But in my senior year of college, I took a marketing class. And for my marketing class, I held a rep event. So my senior class project was to do a sales meeting for an audio company.
Did you count that? And when you said you were doing the math in your head?
No, I didn't count one. That one was practice. But Jane, my father's customer that was the advertising manager, connected me with some people, Bill Caulfield from Vector Research at the time. And Bill gave me all these stereo review studies and banners and things. So I put on a rep meeting. I mean, little did I know that I would be doing rep meetings. But so that was my senior class project. At Christmas break, I took my resume. I went to CES in Las Vegas, got myself a beautiful room at the Airport Inn.
And haven't looked back.
And went to the high-end exhibits with my resume, and I knocked on doors, and I knocked on the door at David Hafler Company. David Hafler, one of the original audio pioneers, like Saul Morantz, and so I met David, and I said, I'm going to be in the audio business, and here's my resume. And he said, when do you graduate? And I said, May. He said, why don't you come to work for us?
That's awesome.
Come to Pennsauken, New Jersey.
Wow.
California boy.
Hey, the beach is right there too.
Come to New Jersey. I'll pay you $400 a week.
Wow.
And I said, absolutely.
Done deal.
Done deal. And I graduated on a Friday. Over the weekend, I packed my car. On Monday, I took off in my car with all my possessions, stopped in Chicago at CES and set up the Hafler booth.
Wow.
And then when CES was done, I tore down the booth, got back in the car, and drove to New Jersey.
That's incredible.
And started my first job.
That's so awesome. Funny enough, though, you think about it, I can't imagine the number of people I've met that their first day on the job is a show, and specifically CES. So neat to see that that's not something that's new in this space. That's always been that way, huh?
But the story gets stranger.
Uh-oh.
So I'm at Hafler for about a year and a half. We launched professional amplifiers and end up taking pretty big share in the commercial business in theaters. And then David and Ed Gately, who was the president of the company at the time, buy a speaker company called Acoustat out of bankruptcy. And they asked me if I would like to go to Florida and run the brand and bring it back and relaunch it. So I packed up the car and I drove to Florida and became the head of sales and marketing for Acoustat to relaunch this brand. And that worked really well. We got the brand back up. We got it placed in multiple stores, started to grow the business. Then I got homesick. And I was in LA on a business trip, and I was meeting with my sales rep at the time. I said, I'm really homesick. I really want to go back to LA. And he said to me, well, my ex-fiance is dating the president of Infinity, and I'll give Janie a call. And I said, Janie? And it turns out that was the same woman.
That's incredible.
That worked for, well, it gets even more incredible as the thing. So she introduced me to Arnie Nudell and Carrie Christie, my heroes from the local hi-fi store, because this was the local high-end brand. I had always wanted to work for Infinity. And they hired me to launch their new high-end speakers, the Infinity IRS 5, $100,000 speaker system and betas. And And I spent the next 2 years building that business. And then I became the national sales manager. And then I was interested in product. And so I developed a full line of car stereo speakers, a Kappa car and RS car stereo. And Infinity's business grew in car. And we became the #1 premium audio brand as part of Harman International at that point. So about a year or two after that, Arnie Nudell and Sidney Harman aren't quite getting along, and there's tension in the company. And my phone rings one day, and it's Jane. Haven't talked to her in 6 years since I started the job, and she says, I'm consulting for this little company in Miami that specializes in switch boxes and volume controls. And they're looking for somebody to run the sales. Would you know anybody?
Well.
And, I'm thinking, because about a year or two before that, Denon had introduced the first 5-channel receiver. And the first thought that came to me is, where are people going to put all these speakers? Right. So televisions back then were big, massive, heavy things. So the first thing I did is I wrote a spec for a product that was a center channel speaker that sat on top of a television.
Wow.
Now it's kind of common, but that was a new thing.
Wild at the time.
So we made it, and it became Infinity's biggest selling SKU ever, the Video One.
Yep. Wow.
And then it's, where are we going to put all these surround speakers for 5 channels? Well, in the walls, right?
Naturally.
So we created the Infinity Environmental Reference Standard, ERS series, with a little company called Speakercraft at the time. And we took those to a new association called CEDIA, which we were founding members, and went to the first CEDIA show. In Amelia Island, Florida. There were 39 of us in a tent.
Jeez.
And there I met Ivan Niles Zuckerman, introduced by Jane. And Ivan and I absolutely hit it off and connected right away.
That's incredible.
And he said, come to work for us. I said, I can do this. I think you're in a space that's going to be the thing. So I left Harman, and the #1 speaker brand, people thought I was nuts. And I went to work for a small company doing about $5 million a year, selling switch boxes and volume controls. But I was absolutely convinced we were going to grow this business, because this was the next big thing.
Got Janie to thank for a lot. Maybe I should be talking to her. Is that what I'm hearing
so
now?
it's really amazing.
That's crazy. But I mean, you hear about it all the time. Just the size, or rather lack thereof, of this industry, and the relationships and how important they are. I will get to it eventually, just kind of what that means in this space, and it shows. But it's it's cool too, because it feels like everyone out there has everyone's back, and like we know, right? Like it just where those connections can kind of crop up in areas that you least expect it, and how they can come through in just some really incredible ways. As
to this day, I understand the connection because we related to the same things, and Jane used to say we're PLU, people like us. But the fact that she showed up at 3 different times in my life at random that were really important in my career would just, it was just, I still don't understand it, but I am totally grateful for it.
Wow. And I mean, again, people, I don't want to skip through your Niles career, but does she show up at any other point, like, so, move since? Or
Well, she had a big influence at Niles at the time because other people that worked at Niles, like Al Burdett, who did all of our marketing, brilliant genius, came through Jane as well. Wow. So her role as a consultant really put Niles on the map, brought the executive team that would then drive this company from 5 million to 80 million over the next 12 years together. So
That's
she
awesome.
she was the glue that made all that happen.
That's incredible. What stands out to you? That was the longest stretch, right? Yeah, Niles. Is that right?
I joined Niles in 1992 as VP of Sales, but I was also, it was a small company. There were 35 of us there.
Right.
And from being involved in product development and Infinity and having that inclination and being a product geek and writing product specs, I took the product management department, which for speakers was me.
Yeah.
So in my part-time, I'd go out on the road, I'd pitch things, I'd talk to dealers, and they'd say, if you had one of these, and I would, on a plane, I would write up and I would flesh out those details. Wow. And then I would actually do much of the sourcing of engineering and contract writing and vendors and pilot runs. And eventually I became responsible for sales, marketing, training, product development, engineering, purchasing, sourcing, supply chain, quality control.
Yeah, call it everything, right?
Yeah. And I did that for 4 years as we built the company, and then we sold the company to Nortec in 2005. Wow. So, and Ivan decided to retire, and I stayed on as president and CEO of the company.
That's incredible. Well, to go from that and then your next stop is Sony. Is that right? Did you go? Was it Niles to Sony?
Well, my next stop was actually Nortec, who bought us.
Right.
Bought up a number of companies in this space. They bought up Niles, Speakercraft, Elan, Xantec, Channel Plus, Panamax, Furman,
a who's
whole
who
bunch of companies
in this industry.
And everything was really good until the housing crisis hit.
Right.
Because Nortec's primary business was building products, Newtone intercoms, Nordyne air conditioners, Newtone bath fans and range hoods. But they were also very big in leveraged finance. They were, the CEO was a peer of Michael Milliken, and he was a junk bond king at Goldman Sachs before he became CEO of Nortec.
Yeah.
So the company had, I don't remember exactly, but something like $2 billion in bonds that they had sold that were contingent upon the operating company paying a dividend to the holding company to pay the interest on the debt. And when the housing crisis came, it was pretty clear they weren't going to be able to continue to pay a dividend. And so they would have to renegotiate the debt with the bondholders, which they did, and they did a debt for equity swap, and the bondholders became the shareholders of the business as it emerged from bankruptcy. Now, the good news is the operations didn't shut down. The bad news is they had to save costs in order to pay back that debt, and the bondholders wanted to get their money back. And so they came to me, and they asked me to move from Miami to Southern California to Carlsbad, of all places, which is where I live now, and merge all these CI brands together and essentially get rid of a layer of management and converge the brands. And I thought about it. very hard. And I didn't think that it would succeed. The analogy that I used to use was, if you're a football fan in Northern California, you got the Raiders and you got the 49ers, and one's got maroon pants, and the other's got silver pants, and if you took them and you like slammed them together and you had silver tops and maroon pants,
it ain't gonna work.
You'd lose all the fans. And so that was the analogy I used. Like, Niles and Speakercraft are similar companies with very different personalities, and part of our thing was we appeal to different people for that very reason. If you smashed them together, you'd likely just lose everybody.
Yeah.
So I declined the job, and they hired somebody and said, here's your new boss. And I said, it's time for me to go. And I retired for the first time at 50.
Yeah.
In 2010, and I packed my bicycle and my guitar and my camera, bought a one-way ticket for Italy, and spent the next 3 months biking around Europe and visiting the Tour de France and taking pictures and
living it up for a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, and doing some soul searching, to be honest. Where do I go from
there?
Yeah. I was all in.
Right.
I mean, I had been all in 24/7 for 18 years.
So to see, to go from that company, 35 people, is that what you said is what it was?
35 people when I joined, and at the height we were 240 people. We went from 5 million in sales to about 80 million in sales.
So strong growth. Where I'm heading with it is that to go from that to, eventually a call comes, we can get into the story about it, but the size of a company to go from Niles to, what Sony's a little bigger than 250, right?
Yeah,
I think so. If I had to guesstimate, no. And even though, revenue as well, but, it had to be a world of difference, at least you'd think, right? I heard you talk, we've talked about it too, just kind of the ability and how you were set up, and, very fortunate, way to operate, building that CI business there, but.
Well, so Sony was a Niles customer. Mm-hmm. So Sony bought Niles amplifiers and Niles IR products for Sony's custom installation rack mount systems that they sold turnkey to custom installers. And the guy that was running Sony's CI program, Neil Manowitz, who's now Sony's president and COO, he and I became friends. Yeah. And we thought alike. And he went from running Sony CI to running all of Sony's audio. And then he called me when he learned that I had moved to Southern California after the Niles thing and after I got done riding my bike. And he said, are you living in California? Because the Sony headquarters were in Rancho Bernardo, basically in the same neighborhood. And I said, yeah. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm working on a startup in high-res wireless speakers, but we haven't got it off the ground. And he says, well, would you sign an NDA? And I said, sure. And he came in and he filled me in on Sony's turnaround plans to change what they had been in large volume commodity to go more premium. And on the audio side, high-res audio, custom install, and on the TV side, 4K TV and more premium products. Yeah. And he said, would you consult for us? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to consult for you. And then about a week later, he said, would you consider a full-time job? And I wasn't doing anything. And I said, yeah, I would consider a full-time job. And so he said, well, we need somebody to lead our CI. And it's like, yeah, I've done that before. I can
familiar.
Do that.
Right.
And so I took the job, and I got there and I dug in, and I realized that they defined CI in a very narrow fashion, different than how I would define CI. So after about 90 days, I wrote a business plan, and I sat down with the senior leadership of Sony, Mike Fasullo at the time, and said, here's what I think you're doing right, and here's what I think you're doing wrong, and here's what I think the opportunity is, and here's the way I'd like to do it if we really want to do this. And they said, well, we brought you in to do it. You know how to do it. Go do it. And so they gave me the green light, and I reorged the Sony structure, hired third-party sales reps under a contract, merged 3 different Sony sales channel divisions, the premium audio, the custom installers,
Yep.
and the distributors that serviced custom installers, and said, this is really one business. There's not
Right.
three different businesses. So I merged them all together, set up incentive programs so that they all acted the same with aligned incentives,
Right.
and a cadence and a regular reporting structure and a process, and plugged it all in,
right.
and
And the rest, well, they
of
could
course
say,
it worked.
Right,
I mean, I
right.
knew it
The
would
rest,
work.
as they say, is history. Right?
I've
So-
been, the systems that I used, I started developing at Infinity
Yeah.
in 1986, perfected at Niles over 18 years. And so essentially went around the country, and I went to all my friends that knew how to run the playbook, just like a football coach
Yeah.
would, and said, if you want this, you're in. We're gonna
Right.
run the old playbook. Come with me.
Find your coordinators,
And
essentially.
yeah, and everyone said, we don't know if it'll work. I said, I don't know if it'll work. They said, but if you think it'll work, yeah,
Build
we'll
enough
come
trust
with you.
in you. Right, yeah, absolutely.
So we plugged it in, and of course it worked.
Mm-hmm.
We went from 55 million when I started to over 400 million 3 years later.
Yeah,
It was a
incredible.
rocket ship. It
Yeah,
was
it's
just...
a testament too, right? Just experience over time, and having done it at several stops to see it just sort of exponentially grow the level of
Yeah.
success, and just different way of thinking, right?
What's so gratifying now is,
Yeah.
like, here's somebody
Yeah.
from another factory came up to me and said, we never really cared about custom install or this channel until you showed what could happen at Sony, and now we really care about it, and that's why we're here.
There's a testimonial that could be shared about just sort of the impact that kind of sums it up. And I know there's more to talk about too, is in terms of having those opportunities to do that as well. But I don't want to gloss over. I'll let you keep rolling, because the work at Sony happens, and another opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, well, the other major audio company
Yeah.
in Southern California, in my neighborhood, if
Yep.
you will, is called Sound United.
Yep.
And Sound United owns the
Some big brands.
no longer Sound
Yeah.
United.
Yep,
It's now
yep.
Massimo Consumer, but at the time, Sound United, we owned Polk Audio, Definitive Technology, Boston Acoustics, Marantz, and Denon. And I'd had friends at Sound United. I know a lot of people in the business, been doing it a long time, and they'd been trying to get me to move from Sony and come over, and they just didn't have the right opportunity. I just didn't think I could succeed, to be honest. But then they came to me one day and said, well, we have an opportunity for a senior vice president of the Americas to run all the sales and marketing and commercial operations. They called it from Canada all the way down through South America.
Yep.
And I said, that sounds pretty exciting. So I joined January 2020. And 6 weeks later, COVID starts up in Asia. It affects the factories. And then a month later, it moves to the U.S., and we're all working from home. And
Very different world.
Who knows what's going to happen here? But it turned out to be, good for the business, and
got a lot of people to kind
a lot
of
of
consumers
people
turn that focus inside. Staying at home.
Exactly.
Right?
And we never let working from home or Zoom get in the way of growing the business. In fact, we bought Bowers and Wilkins on laptops from Zoom, and integrated
crazy.
the merger that way. We did have one face-to-face meeting with the executive teams in Bermuda, because it was the only place that the Brits could travel to and the Americans could travel to, where we could both get in and meet.
Wow.
And that was the only face-to-face that we had in the whole process. But we bought and integrated that company all via remote. And then we were private equity owned, and the private equity firm decided to put us up for sale. And we made a number of Zoom pitches and otherwise to potential interested parties. And eventually were acquired by Massimo in April of 2023. 2022.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And brings you to today, right?
Yeah.
So retired for a second time, is that right?
Yeah. Well, so I was on the executive team
Yep.
at Massimo, the integration team, integrating Sound United into Massimo, and went to the executive meetings about the long-term strategy, and frankly, very compelling.
Yeah.
What they're working on.
There's a lot going on there.
I believe is correct, as much as I believed in 1992 that the Switchbox Volume Control Company would eventually be. The difference is a lot older than I was then, and didn't see myself with a 20-year time horizon to see this and develop this through. And I didn't think it was fair to them or fair to me to pretend if I really didn't intend to work that much longer.
There's so much to kind of appreciate about that, right? Understanding where you are and where a company might be, and just having the wherewithal, really, right? Step aside, let them kind of.
Well, one thing that I love the business.
Yeah.
I love to work. I love to compete.
Yeah.
I love the products. But I'm also aware that I'm not as young as I used to be, and how many good days do we all have left? And I'm very blessed that I am perfectly physically healthy.
Take it's the Tom Brady approach, right? Retire while the GOAT in the game, if you will, right? There's still more to give, but maybe not quite at that level.
Yeah. So I went to Massimo and said, probably it's best for you to bring somebody in here that's got a longer term horizon than me, and let's I'm gonna retire. And that was January of last year, so it's been
23.
16 months. And it's been great, and I don't regret the decision. And I'm riding my bike 160 miles a week, and I'm cooking and doing all the other things I like to do, reading. But I miss the industry. I miss the product. I miss my friends.
That itch starts happening. Right?
And while I don't want to be 60 or 70 hours into Zoom calls and meetings, I still want to be involved, and I still.
The cool thing, a great opportunity presents itself, right? And that's obviously, as we're sitting here, why we're here talking, why we're able to talk, at this Oasys Summit, but. You look back at every one of those stops, it kind of speaks to why this seems like, and coming from someone who's on the team might seem a little biased to be saying, but seems like the perfect opportunity for basically rinse and repeat what you've done, right? It feels like at other stops to see sort of the potential that is within a company, whether, previous stops obviously product based, right? But, you see the potential of the launch pad that a company might be sitting at, or the opportunity to influence, to put your stamp, right, on kind of where things could head, or just to help them get to that next level.
I wouldn't call it rinse and repeat, because I don't think it's rinse and repeat.
Fair. Yeah.
But what is appealing to me is a couple things that have been consistent throughout my journey and where things have succeeded for me. Number one is quality of people. The people at Nationwide are great. I've known them. Richard Gleick's, Ozione, he and I go back to 1983 to Hafler days, and we've been together at every stop in one way, shape, or form. Hank Alexander worked at Niles as the Western Regional Sales Manager, so he was on my team. We worked together.
And small industry. It's
Dean Sotilli and I get along really well, and have had multiple meetings through Sony, even though it wasn't directly connected. HTSN was. But Dean and I found we got along. Tom Hickman and I get along. So the quality of people is really, you and I know each other from
dealerscope days. It's unbelievable. So no matter what angle or what portion of this industry you're in, it is small and well connected.
So that's number one. Number two thing that appeals to me is a company that's got a commitment, but early in the journey. So Sony knew they needed to change. They knew they needed to be in premium. They didn't know what CI was, really. I mean, they called it CI, but they didn't define it the way I would define it. And they didn't understand where the opportunity was, but they knew they needed to make a change. They knew they needed somebody that knew it.
Right.
And they were willing to let me tell them what they should do. Mm-hmm. And it worked. So the parallel that I see here that I saw at Niles and other places is good people in the right place, committed, and a willingness to bring in some expertise, and then implement suggestions to make it work. So all those things line up for me. I get excited.
And well, so let's be real. You still get to ride that bike.
Yeah, and
that can't be overlooked.
Well,
in it. No, I joke, right?
For sure. None of us know how many days we have left, and as you get older, you kind of look and say, I don't want to be all he did was work.
Right. I joke.
So,
no.
Yeah, I still get to ride the bike.
Right.
And
enjoy life while still having an impact. And to your point, the friendships, right? It's I can only imagine an industry when you've given as much blood, sweat, and tears to it, hard to just, cold turkey quit right, and step away from. You get that itch and want to, and I'm sure, not to say that you just disassociated and didn't talk to anyone, right? I'm sure that you still talk to people, but it's like the wanting to be involved and wanting to,
it's the relationships you build through shared challenges in a work environment. Hey, we're gonna try this. We're gonna go take this hill. We're gonna compete. We're gonna launch a new product. We're gonna launch a new buying group. We're gonna launch a new initiative, and like having to get together and work together to make that happen builds really tight bonds, especially for me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I've missed that.
Yeah. So Andy, Hank, Dean, they twist your arm enough and you're here. so let's talk about here. There's one question I want to ask up front because I'm sure, we sent out a press release a couple weeks ago at this point, by the time this publishes. And I'm sure there's assumptions made in an industry. There's a recent retirement or step back really from our organization with Richard, who you mentioned. Are you here to replace him?
No, and frankly, that's where discussion started with me.
Yeah,
I had known for quite some time because of my relationships that Richard would eventually be stepping aside. And when Richard decided that it was time for him to back off the day-to-day reins, they asked if I would be interested. And I said, well, I'm totally interested, but I'm not ready to commit to that level of work intensity.
And who wants to be the guy that gets to replace Richard?
Well,
Gleitz?
Richard is not replaceable.
First of all, right? Can't do it. First of all, but no, that's I think important to address too, right? Because there's knows what people think, but his influence is still here though, right? As you can see, and a gentleman, a man that. I can't imagine that ASEAN team not wanting to at least continue to pick his brain as long as it's still able to be picked.
Well, Richard is still engaged, even though he's stepping back from the day-to-day.
Yep.
And Richard kind of created the modern
right.
AV specialty CI buying group model, and he's done a brilliant job with it, and it's emulated, but not duplicated everywhere.
Yeah.
And Richard is still emotionally invested, and Richard will continue to be involved in the strategic direction of ASEAN.
The time will always be the time.
Time is the time.
So then, natural follow-up is, as a consultant to this CI group at Nationwide, what will be your focus? What do you, see yourself doing, or what's kind of been laid out in front of you?
Well, just to follow up.
Yeah.
So the conversation was, would you be interested in running ASEAN? No, I really can't make that commitment because it's just not right. But I would love to be involved and help you guys in your journey. And so we, mostly Dean and me, spent some time setting up a statement of work and a scope. And essentially, it is to evaluate the three groups in the overall CI initiative, the commercial, Ellipsis, Oasys,
Yep.
and Ozione, and look at the CI strategy overall. How do we best serve members? How do we best serve vendors? How do we position the groups? How do we staff the groups? How do we manage the groups? What sort of events do we do? How do we improve events? How do we change events? What sort of people structure do we have? And to look at the entire portfolio holistically and make recommendations for growth, improvement.
Yeah. But the cool thing is, I think, you're very uniquely positioned for that, right? Given the stop, not even just because of, the stops themselves you made and the work you've done at those stops, but that outside perspective too. Like you've done this, but you're coming into a team that, Ozione still, 2 years and a couple months since the merger with Nationwide, and really expanding that CI division here, and even Oasys and Ellipsis. This is only the second annual Oasys Summit.
Yeah,
Ellipsis still has theirs coming.
Just getting off the
so
ground.
Like a very new organization. The folks here have been heads down, kind of building this thing, and are, for better or worse, very emotionally and well invested in what's going on here. So having that sort of outside perspective of what the work that's been done to date, and then to have you be able to review all that and sort of, again, bring that outside perspective to kind of what's being built, invaluable. And like I said, just uniquely positioned to do that.
I think that I tend to approach business and business problems from a different perspective than is traditional.
Yeah.
Whether Niles, Sony, I like to work backwards. Get a mental picture of what 10 years down the road looks like, and then work backwards to
how do we get there?
How do we get there?
Yeah.
Where frequently what happens when you get into the battle is you think about tactical steps. I've got this. How can I use it?
Right.
And it's much harder to think about what does my constituents need? What do members need from a buying group? What do vendors need from the members of a buying group? And then how do I create something to deliver to both parties is very different than I got this, where do I send them?
Yeah.
So that strategic, longer term, where am I? Where do I want to go? How am I going to get there? If I don't have resources, how am I going to get there in spite of the fact I don't have resources?
Yep.
Is a different way to work than a tactical heads down management. And when you're in the middle of the firefight, it's hard to step back and see that big picture. So what I think I can bring and what I plan to bring is that detached view and recommendations of how to implement that.
Perfect, because you finished an answer anyway. That's a good cut point. And I know we're excited to, see that come to fruition, right? And I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you. What is this officially like week 1? What do we at as we're sitting here at Oasys Summit?
It's
how long
week 3.
Week 3, okay. so it's still.
But it's not like I haven't been thinking about it for a while.
Sure. For officially on board, on paper at week 3, but. So lots to do ahead of you, but to be sitting here at this summit week 3, what's kind of, this is one of the 3 legs of the organization that you'll be looking at, but kind of the vibe at this event. What do you get in the sense, of as you're out there walking around a show that, is, triple, quadruple in size compared to last year. So what do you see in just initial impressions?
Well, the sense is there's a ton of energy. I'm very gratified to see how into it everybody is, from the dealers to the vendors to the staff. It feels like people want to be here and they're enjoying to be here, which is great. I would be really nervous if I got here
right.
and
like, what did I sign up for?
and it was dead, and people were down.
Yep.
I mean, I know the business community has been challenging since I
Absolutely.
retired. So I kind of expected people would come in a little bit with their heads down, and I'm not seeing it. So that's very gratifying. So there's a ton of energy. It's got to have that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do anything without that. Beyond that, I'm filling like notebooks, just walking around and watching and listening and trying to understand and talking to dealer members and talking to vendors and talking to staff and talking to Hank and and talking to the field sales team and where's your pain points and what's working for you and what's not working for you, and getting to know the organization.
No, that's awesome. And much can be said those few years where we weren't able to be together in person, but these face-to-face opportunities are certainly, even though it feels like the frequency's getting up there, the opportunities they provide us to sit down and just chat, even like this, even be able to do this is something that I think is invaluable in that sense, and need to be able to have you here and do this. So I think I've stolen a lot of your time, and I know we're going to be having follow-up conversations. So as much as I'm itching to keep asking questions, I know that I got to let you get back out there and chat with the dealers, because your time, as much as I appreciate you giving me some time, I know your time's more valuable out there. So this was incredible. Thank you for taking us on that journey. And I think that picture that you painted, every step of the way kind of just goes to show, we mentioned it, why you are very uniquely positioned to kind of come in and do the work you've been tasked with. And so we're looking forward to it. I personally just sort of am very excited to watch, what unfolds here. So we appreciate it, and I can't wait to keep working with you, man. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate being here. I was so excited last night. I couldn't sleep. My mind was just racing about all the stuff I want to do and all the people that it's just been so nice to be back and talk to people. And frankly, people have been so welcoming. It's
heck yeah, man.
it's totally gratifying.
Got a lot of friends out here, so let's go hang out with them.
And thanks for spending time with me. I appreciate it. And look forward
Anytime.
to working together with you and the rest of the team at Nationwide.
Awesome. And thanks again to Frank, for taking the time and sitting down for a podcast with me while we were in Austin, and B, I think I speak on behalf of everyone at Nationwide for him taking time out of his retired life to join us in our efforts and what we're doing at Nationwide to, like we said, and talked about throughout, to consult and help set that strategy and set the vision for our custom integration division. So lots of great things expected out of him and the team as a whole, and look forward to watching the momentum continue to build there, and just excited to be a part of. So appreciate that. And as always, appreciate you listening to the Independent Thinking Podcast, and we'll catch you next time.